You passed your barbecue sauce check. It's
The No Class RPG Podcast.
with your hosts, Eddie.
And Matt.
Matt, we had some delicious barbecue right before this.
Yes, we did. It's from the infamous, nay, famous Bodacious Barbecue on Moberly Street in Longview, Texas.
Which, for you international listeners, you may not know that Bodacious is a chain of barbecue places, but there is only one true home for barbecue. That's the one on Moberly.
Yeah, the original location. And they've went up against big city
nights.
barbecue vendors or whatever and come out, second, third, fourth, first, place. They're Texas Monthly. They're in the top 5 these days.
Yeah, they're national. They're statewide rated. Which, when you're in a state known for barbecue and a state this big,
that's really noteworthy. Absolutely, that's what I talk about when you got a state bigger than most countries. It's known for barbecue, and you're noteworthy in that regard. Oh yeah,
Yeah, I was gonna say, what was the one we went to in Dallas? We'll talk bad about them real quick.
Hard 8.
Yeah.
That people have just raved about them. And don't get me wrong, if you're barbecue poor, I'm sure you'd be impressed by the Hard 8. But you need to come. We're spoiled. Yeah, you owe me a Coke.
Ding, ding.
Yeah.
But we ended up taking the what were they with the Wisconsin crew?
Yeah.
And we ended up going, guys, we're sorry, this wasn't
And
that
they
great.
just raved, and I was like, God bless y'all. God bless y'all. That.
So hopefully someday they'll come down this way and have some of our delicious barbecue.
Oh, yeah. Their minds will be blown.
And while we're talking about those guys,
Yeah. But thank you very much to Brian Merchant, who is a fine American and just an all-around great guy.
a true patriot.
Absolutely. He gave us some really good feedback, which we really appreciate. And he gave us a great idea for a topic that we may or may not be using in the near future.
We probably will. We need topics. We need all the help we can get.
Please. But, you got to, God bless old Robert O, that he gave us a bunch of topics at one time, but we chewed through them like in one episode when we really should have. But we were still getting our sea legs and learning things then. But like I said, great feedback from Brian was, I wondered about, we've kind of changed our format over time, and I'd wondered how people like that. Like, no, stick to strictly talking about RPGs or just this one RPG. But no, Brian said he likes the geek culture, nerd culture bit and whatever. So I really appreciate that feedback.
Yeah. Well, here's the other one for you listeners. Do you want us to talk about something that's not RPG related?
Yeah.
Because I, for one, think we should keep it RPG related. We can talk about other stuff, but the focus, the big topic, has to be RPG related. But what do you think? What would you like to hear us talk about?
Yeah.
Would you like us to just load one up that's the sounds of silence? You just sleep to it. I heard back from our 4th listener, Ace.
Oh yeah, thank you, Ace. He's a follower. He's not just a listener. He's a follower.
He's a quality individual.
Absolutely.
So that was good to hear from him.
We appreciate everyone, by the way. You do. Absolutely.
Well, this is the point in the program where we talk about the long con.
What is the long con?
I have no idea. It's just on my script. They pay me. I read it.
There you go.
Who knows?
That's that audacious duo that have the nerve, the unmitigated gall to hold a convention, an in-person convention in the time of the COVID.
Cody.
Yeah, that's for you, Cody. So
The audacious and bodacious pair.
Exactly. A bodacious pair is always appreciated. But we're pushing forward, because the governor says it's okay, and actually I'm really proud of. I'd recently seen some statistics or information that all the states have seen maybe a slight uptick or a surge, or more than a slight. There are 3 states that have seen a decline in cases of COVID-19, and Texas is one of those states. So I'm really tickled about that.
Are you sure about that? Are you positive?
I'm absolutely positive that I'm tickled about that.
There's a little in-joke there for you folks.
Yeah. Hey, I love everybody. Everybody's entitled to their opinion. Absolutely. That's what makes America great. You're entitled to your opinion. Anyway, but
you're entitled to our opinion.
Absolutely.
That's the most important part.
Let me lean back for that laugh. Hope you're not deaf now, folks. But anyway, we're going ahead with Long Con. We've had some new people like the page. And we're up to 500
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's just thank you, everyone. We're just humbled, and our minds are blown. And we never started this for any reason other than we love gaming, and we really loved going to North Texas RPG Con. And we were like, man, I wish we could see some of these people more than once a year because we love these people. We love gaming with them. We love to interact with them. And, after the games, share a drink, swap stories, whatever. And we're like, how can we make that happen more than once a year? And we thought, well, we'll start a con, but then, no one will come. And, and this year
Start
that's
a
probably
podcast
true.
that nobody listens to.
Yeah. And so, anyway, yeah. But yeah, no, so we're moving forward. Things are really exciting. The hotel is so tickled to have us. They've offered, already we get a phenomenal rate from them for rooms. They've discounted it even further. If you don't have your room yet, there we have a link, but even without the link, you can call and say, I want the long con rate. They're doing all these hygienic measures. They've always been very hygienic. They're even going even further. We've always been a hygienic con before current events. We're taking extra steps. Eddie's invested in a handy gun thermometer. I've bought even more hand sanitizer than we normally keep on hand. Blah blah blah. Anyway, yeah. Things we're going to socially distance. We have the whole menu this year, and we're going to spread out. We're going to spread out. Anyway, so I'm really excited. It's infectious.
The excitement is infectious at the Long Con.
Exactly. Excitement's infectious, and only the excitement.
I hope so.
Poor choice of words there.
Yeah.
Freudian slip. Oh, anyway. All right.
Well, before we talked about it for 5 minutes, I was going to say we didn't have much to say about it.
Yeah. There's your obligatory smack. There's the first one.
Well, let's see if I edit those out or not.
I can only hope because I did it again.
Probably not.
I'm sorry, folks. I'm trying.
Well, even more popular than the Long Con talk is the pop culture minute up here up the front.
Oh.
So, you got any TV shows, movies you want to talk about?
Well, yeah, I'm glad you asked. So, since last we met, I watched Train to Busan, if I'm pronouncing it correctly.
We'll assume you are.
Yeah, so I'd heard about this, years ago. At that time, it was available on Netflix, and I've added it to my like list. Well, it's fallen off Netflix, haha. But I watched it on one of these streamers, and Tubi or whatever, which it wasn't too bad. And I really enjoyed it. But I mean, people had made out like they've broke they've redefined the zombie, movie or whatever. Nah, it was good, but it's like it's a zombie infection breakout on a train. Okay, I mean, that doesn't just redefine the whole genre, but it was still, I think it was a worthy movie, and it's dubbed, but I enjoyed it. You can find it, like I watch it for free on Tubi or whatever.
What era is this from?
This movie's probably about 10 years old.
Oh, wow.
So, it's actually fairly recent.
Part of the current zombie crop.
These are, my nomenclature for zombies, you got like your kind of like foot dragging crawling zombies, and you've got your 28-day sprinters. These are sprinters. So to some reason that always seems a little more, scary. Ooh, they sprint at you or whatever. I mean, it's that quick infection. You got bit. We're not like, I'm going to languish here for days, guys, put me out of my misery. It's like, their eyes start to cloud over and they're snapping their neck and screeching and clawing within 30 seconds or something.
They're volatiles.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, we'll get to that in a minute. So that's my movie. Any movies, comics for you?
Yeah, actually for almost a TV and a comic. The Boys is done now. The season's wrapped. If you were waiting to watch it all on Amazon, now you can. You can binge it all at once. Mm-hmm. I won't give you any spoilers, but this season was fantastic.
Binge worthy.
Was it better than season 1? Maybe. I'd have to go back and rewatch season 1. Season 1 was really, really good, and this one does not fail to deliver.
No, it was a roller coaster ride. It was a lot of fun. It's worthy contribution to the franchise or whatever. And see, interesting, you have the insight that you've read the comic and watched the show, and I believe, don't let me misquote you, in a lot of ways you've felt that the show was the worthier.
Oh yeah, definitely. A lot of times you go back and you're like, whoa, the book was so much better. In this one, the show is so much better because, what is it, Garth Ennis or whatever? Yeah. He hates superheroes, and it shows.
Yeah.
So when you read the comics, you're really getting this, I don't know, you feel the dislike for the heroes, which is fine, but it's kind of like disliking. You're writing about something, your source is something you dislike, so it's like, yeah, okay. And then he's got a tendency to go overboard with stuff, whereas the show reels it in. They've made a lot of good changes that actually make sense.
Like Stormfront was originally a guy.
Right.
And I love the character. I don't want
No
to.
spoilers.
I'm trying to spoil anything, but the one character that they made her look like AOC was originally a guy, and originally was dumb as a rock. But instead, this woman's clever.
Yeah, and they've modernized it. They've been able to do little twists like that.
Yeah. So yeah. So I mean, I'm all on board and think it's wonderful. I have no problem with, when they change characters for something like this. I don't care that they change a gender or nationality or whatever.
And they're such one-dimensional comic book characters in the comics.
Yeah,
they don't really want to flesh them out. And,
yeah.
There's not too much to Homelander except he's evil, which is okay. I get it, but you get a lot more character development and story in the show.
Well, that's something like Game of Thrones, where, and say what you will about George R.R., but he'll take a character that he introduced in this one chapter that's a despicable villain, and then that character got their own chapter, and he humanizes them to where you're like, God, I hate that guy so much, but I kind of feel bad for him, and that's brilliant writing. But anyway.
I've always been a big fan of American Dad. So it's back with a new season. This is kind of our recommendations, folks, if you have nothing to do. So if you like American Dad, I think it's stayed pretty good across the board. It's not like, oh man, until season this, you can watch it and then it falls off a cliff. But I think American Dad's actually stayed pretty funny. I think it's done a lot better with that than Family Guy. So there's a new season of American Dad if you haven't checked it out and you need something to watch.
Cool. Well, there's even some series where honestly it'd be like, hey, you probably don't even want to start watching it till season. That's when it kind of got better or something,
So, how about video games, since we have something in common there to talk about?
All right.
I don't remember how much we talked about this last time. I think maybe Matt was playing it, and I was going to try it out.
I'd mentioned that I just bought it if we're talking about,
Dying Light.
And we'd let y'all know about it. So it's funny. I bought it and tried it, and I liked it, so I mentioned it to Eddie, and, well, I don't think Eddie liked it, though, at all.
I love everything. You know that.
Right.
I like everything.
Yeah.
But I like it.
Yeah.
It's a lot better as a multiplayer game. I mean, it's a good solo game or whatever, one-player game.
Yeah.
But there is something to it to have somebody to play it with.
Oh, man, yeah. And there's some of the fights that a backup would make all the difference. It's still a challenging fight, but not nearly
And I think it's about 5 years old.
Yeah, but for a 5-year-old game, it looks really good. It plays really well. It still has quite the faithful following after 5 years.
Well, the thing I was going to say was that was still big in the zombie heyday.
Yeah.
So it's a zombies. Zombies are taking over this town.
Right. To give you, it's an open world, first person survival horror game by Techland.
So a lot of those are no-goes for me. Like, I can see why I didn't play it 5 years ago.
Right.
It's a zombie game. How many zombie games were there 5 years ago?
Right.
All of them.
But this one's a standout.
And it's a horror survival game. Nah, I don't really play a lot of those. And it's a hardcore parkour.
Yeah, I was going to get to my little funny bit about if you come to me and said, hey, want to play a zombie movie? I'd be like, yeah, maybe. It's got a lot of parkour. Nah, I'm good. But luckily I didn't know that going into it. The parkour is so well implemented that it's not bad. I don't mind it. I like it even, which is saying something. Because stuff like that in a game, this guy will tell you, that's just like, ugh, I hate that stuff. But in this case, I like it because it's well implemented.
Well, I could see that, like we talked about, our buddy Gary. That would be an automatic turn-off for him, is all this running around and jumping like Spider-Man.
Yeah, and I'll give props because, Eddie's like, him and the PS4 controller become one. But it's like, we'll take off running across the rooftops, and I got a head start on him, and all of a sudden I'll look for him, and I'm like, where'd he go? And then on the map, I'll see his blip like 3 blocks ahead of me. And the great thing is, all the zombies are kind of spread out, but as he runs through there, they kind of converge in his wake to follow him. And then sometimes I'll charge into a pack of like 5, and I'm like, damn it, so I really can't follow his path. It's not like he's blazing a trail, That's a whole other thing.
I figured you'd love it every time you started running somewhere, and it's like another player is waiting for you at the checkpoint.
Yeah. There's a couple times, I've had to wait on you, but more times than not, it's me waiting on you. Yeah. So, but anyway, I think it's a great game, and you can probably get it pretty cheap.
Yeah, especially if you just wait on a sale. Dying Light 2 should be on the way soon.
Yeah, which I love getting into something when the next iteration's about to hit, because think if we'd found this 5 years ago and we're like, I'm faming for the next part. But what I'll give them that is, like, there's a main storyline that a lot of people, I've done some research online, have said some good things about. And so far I've enjoyed the main storyline, but you've done a lot of the side quests. What would you say about their side quests? I mean, like for a lot of games, they're just kind of a just,
It's good. It adds to the story. They tie back in and keep it going. Like here, all these posters you see up around town, for example. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's that guy. Here is the governor of the township or whatever you want to say.
Well, at one point, I'm looking off into the distance of the burning town and the zombies moaning everywhere, and there's this big banner hanging off of a building that's a little tattered since this incident's happened, and it says it's like Hell Raid. And you figure, oh, is that like a movie in this world or a video game or something? Well, it is, but Teehee, that kind of, what's what I'm looking for, the immersion, that was another game that this company was originally working on. Mm-hmm. And in fact, you see the arcade game in the lobby somewhere of the hotel.
In the tower, yeah.
In the tower. And I was talking to our bud Cody, and he was telling me that actually they had finally said, I guess they're not going to finish the game, so what they've done, they just push out the door where you can, I think, get it as maybe an inexpensive DLC or free or something, that you can, like if you go, after you've loaded it, you can click on the arcade game and you go into Hell Raid, so you can play Hell Raid like a game within a game. Which there are a number of interesting looking DLCs for this game as well, just FYI, that prolong the story and add more content. Anyway.
All right. Well, that was our video game. How about a board game?
Well, one more thing on video games. I know we've beat this horse to death, but I thought this would be funny. I find time to play a little bit of For Honor. Mm-hmm. What's your favorite hero in For Honor? Like, the characters you play are the heroes, because there are little scrub troops in some of these battlefields you fight in, but you're playing the hero characters. What's your favorite hero?
Okay, the Conqueror.
Oh, really? Yeah. Well, you've played him quite a bit, but you play the other ones a lot too.
Oh, that was the one I was figuring you were trying to coax me into saying.
No, but I mean, honestly, I don't know, so that's why I asked. I thought our listeners and I will find out in the same stroke. So,
okay, I say the Conqueror. What do you say? You jumped around a lot, but I bet it's Mr. Hammer right now. Yeah,
right now I'm really into the Jormungandr or whatever, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. My Hollish is not the best, or my Swedish, whatever. But the Jormungandr I've enjoyed a lot. I'm pretty good with him. But I will say these different daily quests that whatever you have to do will kind of nudge you into playing different classes. I hadn't played the Shigoki in a while, and I got on him, and man, there was a dude that we were in a breach game that he was being faced down by 3 guys, and they're owning him, but he's not dead, and I charged him just as he hit the dirt, and man, I faced off and took down all 3 of those with the Shigoki, and I'm like, yeah.
That's the one I would have said before when we were first getting into it. Yeah. That would be your favorite character.
But I will say, as soon as I was done with those particular group of characters that he's part of, I jumped back to the hammer guy, because I do pretty good. He's that sweet spot. He's a hard hitter, but he's more mobile. The Shigoki can be aggravating when you're trying to rush across the battlefield. Mm-hmm. He is so very slow, but there's a fair trade-off. He's a mountain. I mean, he can take a lot of abuse and dish a lot out. So anyway, it's a fair trade.
Yeah, I tried that just a few minutes ago before we started doing the cast, and boy, am I rusty at that game.
Yeah,
I've got Persona 5, I think. Robert Vegeta will be able to correct me. I think he's a big fan of that game. I'm going to try that again. I've tried it before, so we'll see how that goes. Yeah. And I've got something else that I can't even remember, but I've got a couple. I'll have a few new ones for you guys next time, probably.
Cool. And also on PS4 front news and those, listening, apparently PS4s are vodka proof.
Yeah. As long as you have a lot of rice in your house.
Exactly. Luckily, I quickly wrapped it in a thin T-shirt, stuck it in a trash bag full of rice, and prayed, I was like, I promise I'll do better, And, yep, working like a champ. So, yay. All
right. A board game. You actually got to have a chance to finally sit down and play some Castle Panic. So did our friends Cody and Sean.
Yeah. Whenever Eddie was, I won't say working, but was a
I still am.
Yeah,
I'm pimping these games.
yeah.
But thanks to the time of the COVID,
yeah.
that's slowed down. You can't go and do board game
Because everybody
demos
loves,
anymore.
let me hold those dice and roll them on my turn. Here, let me touch this game piece. Or, here, touch my game piece.
Yeah, at least
too.
with an RPG, it's like, you've got your own stuff. Don't touch my stuff.
I've always been don't touch my dice. So, yeah.
Yep.
But anyway, Eddie, in a recent podcast, he's given us some very honest reviews of these games that he's been demoing for these companies. And he really spoke in such a way about Castle Panic that
I love it.
It sounded like a lot of fun. I've been really telling him, like, come on, man, I want to play that board game. But it's, when do you find the time? We finally found the time. It was a blast. I'll highly recommend Castle Panic. It's that sweet spot where easy to get into and learn the basic dynamic, but then there's layers and strategies to it that keep it interesting.
So there's one of the rare 5-star reviews from both of us on a game, on a board game.
Yeah.
Don't hold your breath for the next one, but we'll see.
yeah, but I'd love when we can get back to promoting board games as well, but not right now.
All right, we've done movies and shows and video games and board games. We've got books. Got any books?
I'm gonna tell on myself. I've tried to get into.
Been busy.
Yeah, I really have. Into Sooner Dead that I'd mentioned before, which is a Gamma World novel. I got in about the first or 2 chapters, but I've been kind of busy. It didn't set the hooks, so we'll see.
Well, for all of our fans out there that just love the Transformers, I found yet another one for you. Transformers and Back to the Future crossover.
Wow.
So they have made an actual Transformers figure, which is a DeLorean, the time machine that converts into a robot now.
Oh, wow.
So that's pretty cool. And now they've done a comic of that, as you would. It's pretty good. It's not done yet, so I can't say, hey, it was great. But the Transformers Terminator, fantastic. Highly recommend that one.
Yeah.
Go check that out.
Yeah, they did a crossover with the Terminator, now Back to the Future. Any of the other classic, like RoboCop or anything like that?
Not that I am aware of. They've done other ones, like there's Transformers Star Trek. There's Transformers Ghostbusters. They're crossing over with My Little Pony right now.
So it's anything from the 80s, but they're both these are both properties from the 80s that they're crossing over with, so that's funny.
Yeah.
Next there'll be Transformers Strawberry Shortcake.
Oh, Transformers G.I. Joe is classic, though. There's been a ton of those.
Well, those were both done by that Marvel cartoon company, that we'd mentioned in a recent cast.
And something that might surprise people, though, was I actually read some Star Wars comics. So for you Star Wars fans out there, if you haven't picked up the Infinities comics, check those out. Do you remember the old Marvel What If comics?
Oh, God, I love those.
Me too. I love
Those
what ifs in general.
Because
and
there
I
were a
love
lot of great
those what if
storylines
comics.
you couldn't pursue in a regular comic, but you could do this one-off in What If, and it would be...
Or it's too dark. Like, what if Thor had, fumbled in this one battle and lost the hammer, and then the whole world would go to hell in a handbasket just because of that one action, that one battle he didn't win, or that one person he didn't save.
Yeah. Like, everybody's got chubbly nubblies for Deadpool these days, but back before Deadpool being the ultimate killer in Marvel, there was a really cool what if where basically the Punisher, like all the heroes became undead or vampires or something. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And basically, Doctor Strange gets killed by the other vampires. They're trying to, turn him, and he's like, I'd rather die first. So he dies, but he kind of pulls like an Obi-Wan maneuver, and his spirit goes into his cloak and his amulet. Well, those fly and seek out the Punisher, and they drop on Frank Castle. So now with the power of the cloak and the amulet, and Doctor Strange like riding shotgun in his mind, he goes and gets like squirt guns full of holy water and things that like machine guns shoot wooden stakes, and he takes out all the other Marvel heroes that have turned vampire or whatever. It's a great what if. You get your hands on that, man. Yeah. But anyway.
So the what if concept is really cool. I'm a fan of it. So for these Infinities, there's 4 books for each of the first 3 movies. So in A New Hope, the what if is what if they didn't blow up the Death Star?
Oh,
what if they had failed on that attack? For The Empire Strikes Back, it's what if Luke had died on the ice planet of Hoth?
Oh, wow.
And then I'll let you figure the other one. I'll let you look into the other one. But I think probably the Empire Strikes, or not the Empire Strikes Back, the Return of the Jedi one was my favorite. Now in the movies that might be different because everybody loves Empire. But actually out of these comics, I'd say Empire was probably the weakest.
Really? That's sad.
Yeah, just for the what if portion of it. But I would definitely say if you like what ifs and you like Star Wars,
that's your jam.
pretty good. Yeah. Pretty good.
Thanks for the tip, bud.
anytime. Oh, here's one we don't usually do. Music.
Oh, okay.
So, did you know AC/DC has dropped a new single?
It's all over my Facebook feed.
Really?
Yeah.
I haven't seen it at all.
Well, it's
I just
all over
stumbled
my
across
Facebook
it on
feed.
YouTube.
Huh. No, it's literally my... But I guess it's like, do you like AC/DC on Facebook?
I think so, but I don't follow anybody or anything.
Right, yeah. So
Keep
don't
that
take
in
that
mind.
personal, folks, but he didn't follow anything.
It's too much. Too much
It's
entirely.
hatred.
So, have you listened to the new single?
Not at all.
And it's all over your Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
Shame.
No offense, but Black Ice... I really didn't like Black Ice.
Well, there's been another one since then, I think.
Oh, good Lord, not even know that.
See?
So, yeah. So, I mean, just no offense, but I ran out to buy Black Ice. I'm like, finally more AC/DC after how many years? And I was like, ugh. I mean, other than like, I think I like, what's that one, Money Made or whatever. But anyway, exactly.
So anyway, the new single is Shot in the Dark.
Oh.
The new album will be Rising Power.
Okay.
So if you like AC/DC, you like this new song. If you don't like AC/DC, carry on. But I like it. It's pretty good.
Well, good.
It had the AC/DC bluesiness that we've all come to know and love. So check that out if you're like me and just happen to not have stumbled across it yet.
Yeah.
There you go. You heard it here first
Awesome.
and last.
I guess before we get to our topic for the day, one of our listeners, Cody Moneybags Hurtle, made us aware of a Dark Trails update.
Doot, doot, doot.
Yeah, because we love Dark Trails and we love David Beatty, and we're all excited and anxious, and definitely anxious. So here it is. In the last 4 weeks, and I'm quoting you, the three of us, I assume David talking here, clocked more than 12 plus hour days than you can imagine! Exclamation point. That end result is all spells are done, God bless them, that's me, and being given one final editing pass by Gil before being sent to Matt for layout. Woot. All right. So
Some other Matt.
exactly, not me. If it was coming to me for layout, it would never get done.
Or it's already done.
It
Looks good.
Looks good. We're good. Like Eddie, hey, check this. Check the whatever the thing. For the.
Oh yeah, the program.
Yeah. Hey, check out the program. Yeah, it looks good. So then later on, I'm like, God, look at all these errors. Somebody should have proofread this. Yeah, really. But anyway, telling them
Because it said in the book, proofread and approved by Matty
Yours
G.
truly by the Grand Poobah. Anyway, but yeah, so I thought for those of y'all that are Dark Trails, and if you're not, you better get on it. I think you can still
Get on the trail.
You can still kick it. I
Yeah.
think, yeah. Even though the Kickstarter's done, David's that much of a sweetheart. He left it open. I'm so excited for this product, but I'm kind of bad that way. But never mind. Anyway,
He's so excited.
I really am. But it's kind of like with, okay, I'm going to go there. Barbarians, I really wish I would have got, because like when you kick it, a lot of the stuff, you get the PDF up front. And the unspoken thing is like, hey, would you kind of kick the tires, check it out. If something's wonky or there's some bad spelling or something, hey, let me know before we send it to final proof or whatever. But I want to wait till it's a finished final product before I even mess with it, which is really shouldn't be that way. But I ain't getting paid, you know what I mean? But anyway, so I know there's been some talk like, well, why aren't you running, Dark Trails or something at the Condor? It's like, well, when I get the finished product in my hot little hands, I'm going to be running the poop out of it. But I'm just that's one of my quirks. I want the finished product. Like, I don't go play betas of games. Other than if I do, I'm really going to try to find bugs and stomp them and do all that stuff. But people kill me that'll play a beta and go, this game sucks. And I'm like, it's in beta, you jackwad. Mm-hmm. It's not a finished product yet. So I don't want to have that negative first impression. I'm going to wait till it's a finished product. Anyway, and go.
Well, with a bunch of things you just brought up, it reminded me of something. When you had water spilled in your PS4, what did you do?
I quickly unplugged it.
You took your own action. You took actions into your own hands, right?
Yeah. I actually disassembled it.
And who was there to help you? Nobody. You had to help yourself.
Yeah.
But if you'd spilled water in your computer, you know what you could have done?
Well, I could have called up Longview Computer Center.
Folks, they don't just centralize your computer anymore.
Not anymore.
They've moved on past that. They realized that once they've got everything centered in your house,
All
You
your
got to keep it up and
electronics.
working.
Right.
So, if you're that kind of person that would pour water into one of your electronics by some foul means, the place to go is Longview Computer Center.
Heck yeah.
This podcast sponsored by
Longview
Computer Center.
For
So-
all your computer centralizing needs.
So thank you. The next hour will be dedicated.
And also, they have ink as well. It comes from exotic squids of Madagascar. They're lovingly tended by virgin maidens. who
They're deep in
extract
the ink.
It's a special process known to only these people. And it's the most exotic and spicy of inks.
Well, have you ever heard of being in the black or
Well,
being in the red for your business being successful?
I have. Well, I think red if you're unsuccessful, but
Exactly.
yeah.
These are the only people that their business can be in the red and they're happy because it's red ink
Oh,
and they're
my.
making sales.
Now you make me want to go draw some blood with red ink.
But we'll get back in black with our topic.
Dun-dun-dun. All right, go ahead, sir.
So this one's a little history lesson from our foggy memories to your head
Huh?
about TSR.
Mm-hmm.
And do you still kind of refer to Dungeons and Dragons or think of it as being a TSR product? Like I got to go get that new TSR book.
No, sadly. I
All
mean,
right.
WotC's owned possession for 20 years now.
20 years now, yeah.
Wow, it blows my mind. But yeah, that TSR logo, I can see it in my mind's eye. Both of them. The one with the little wizard and the one that's the blocked letters,
How about when people would type out TSR and instead of an S, they'd have a $sign?
What?
You remember that?
Yeah.
That was the derogatory, like, money grubbing sign for TSR.
What? Grubbing money.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
But that was way back in the early days of the internet. The fun times.
Those were the good days.
The lawless days.
Wild days. Days of high adventure.
So while TSR was riding high, whatever happened? Why does WotC and eventually Hasbro have control of Dungeons and Dragons?
Oh, indeed.
I don't know. Tell them.
Well, so let's try to be concise, I guess. And by the way, I'll do these as points and then kind of look to you. TSR Hobbies ran into financial difficulties in the spring of 1983. So up to that point, the company had been doing pretty good. Okay. Through layoffs around those times, a number of other relatively successful game companies were formed by ex-TSR employees, Pacesetter and Mayfair Games, and some other employees went to electronic gaming companies like Coleco.
Yeah, and just so you know, the very beginning of D&D, it was first published in 79.
Yep.
So now we're at 83,
Mm-hmm.
and things are going not so well.
Yeah. So this is one of those first hiccups. So after losing their and we've mentioned this before, I think, but by all means, there's some great books about the history of TSR and Gary Gygax and all that. After losing their executive positions due to the company's underperformance, the Bloom brothers subsequently sold their shares to TSR Vice President Lorraine Williams,
A name that shall live in infamy.
who had Gygax removed from the company in October 1985.
Which that could be its own podcast.
Oh gosh, yeah, because like this is it's a really the story. There's ups and downs and drama or whatever just within how things fared. And God bless, everybody wants to go, oh, Gygax, to any of the Gygax family, we love y'all, and I appreciate Gary Gygax so very much. But it sounds like he had ran off to Hollywood at this time because I wouldn't go into it, but like TSR had broke off into 4 different sub companies, and the entertainment leg, he ran off to Hollywood to, party and I'm in Hollywood and all this kind of stuff, and so he kind of left Wisconsin to the Bloom brothers and everybody there.
And while he was away,
the cat, the mice will play, and so so they had mismanaged the company. And so the Bloom brothers were forced out, but as a screw you to Gygax, they sold their shares to Lorraine Williams.
and I don't think Gygax ever saw that possibility could occur, that there would ever be Dungeons and Dragons without him, because how could you imagine that?
Yeah, I mean, not to necessarily say hubris, but, he was thinking like, I am D&D MFers.
Which everybody at the time probably would have agreed with, the general public.
Exactly, but this is how business and how these things happen. He got ambushed in a executive meeting and was told, you're out, Jack.
The ambush at Sheridan Springs.
There it is, yeah. So let's see where we. But yeah. So after losing their executive positions, the Bloom brothers subsequently sold their Lorraine. Okay. So TSR's fortune flourished under Williams, who was a financial planner. So to say what you will, under her, the company flourished for a while. For a while. There we go. But by 1995, had fallen behind their competitors like Games Workshop and Wizards of the Coast in overall sales. Now, this is where, put a gun to my head, concise Reader Digest version, what killed TSR 2nd Edition D&D?
Okay, well, I will throw this out for the kids listening.
Yeah.
That you may not remember this, when hair metal ruled the land, the poisons and the white snakes and such. Mm-hmm. And then Nirvana and Pearl Jam came along and just smashed it down to the ground. Mm-hmm. Well, everybody was having a fine old time with their RPGs, and then collectible card games came out, and Magic smashed everything to the ground.
And so, yeah, you basically, what I was about to get to, and you knew it.
Good.
And so that was it. Really, if you just put a gun to my head, keep it concise, Matt, it would be collectible card games and mismanagement of the company.
Yeah, and I would say the conventional wisdom or the public opinion or whatever, I think, is to say that card games killed Dungeons and Dragons. But no. The mismanagement was the much bigger thing. Card games didn't help, but this would have been kind of like the artist that came through the 90s and still were able to,
Well, this has been the hallmark with a lot of companies to where they've existed by these narrow margins. They don't worry about the downtrends or things that happen, and this stuff happens all the time.
Well, I think it was that we're printing money now, and this train will never end. Nothing will always be making this amount of money.
Yeah, and you just can't think that way, but so many businesses do, and they're too big to fail. No, you're not, and that's what. But that's okay. Tax dollars will bail you out. That's another topic. But anyway. So, seeing the profits generated by Wizards of the Coast with their collectible card game, Magic: The Gathering, TSR attempted to enter the market in 1995 in a novel way with Dragon Dice. But Spellfire, the collectible card game, which is also an attempt at capitalizing on Magic, and Dragon Dice were expensive to produce, but neither one really caught on. Mm-hmm. And actually, Dragon Dice had enough initial success that encouraged them to really go all in, which is a shame.
I want to say they ended up making like 20 million, 40 million that year.
Yeah, I was going to say, despite total sales of 40 million, TSR ended 1996 baroque after they'd made 40 million.
Which was probably lucky for them that they could even do that instead of being, 20 million in debt if they hadn't done Dragon Dice.
Yeah. So TSR was unable to recover its publishing costs, so facing insolvency, TSR was purchased in 1997 by Wizards of the Coast. They initially honored the brand and called it TSR, like a subdivision kind of. And but when they decided to come out with 3rd edition, nope, it said Wizards of the Coast on the books and whatnot. TSR was no more.
TSR wasn't that great a brand because of the fact of Dungeons and Dragons. That's what you knew. I mean, they could have called the business Dungeons and Dragons Corporation.
Pretty much.
So there was some value in TSR, and for the old timers like us, that's the hallowed name or whatever, the sign of quality. That I'll always have fond memories of TSR. But even in TSR, there were times when they were like, let's call this the Dungeons and Dragons wing or this, that, and the other, because we're more known for the product is bigger than the company.
Well, yeah, and we talked about this before, I think, but it's like there was basic D&D and advanced D&D and blip blap D&D, and at some point somebody said, let's just call this all D&D and do one product, not, because what's bad was there were people that, like me as a kid, that was like, well, forget basic, I want the advanced version. And it turns out I probably would have been just as happier with the basic version. And there's some people that were probably put off like, oh my, I don't even know what D&D is, and I'm going to just jump out into this advanced stuff, where they would have liked it better. But that nomenclature threw people off, or whatever. Just, they're like, let's just have Dungeons and Dragons, so. Were those missteps? Yeah, I don't know.
So we're trying to figure out exactly how much we want to give you. We don't want to go back into like when Gary Gygax got bumped out of the company, because that would definitely be its own show.
Oh yeah.
But for the people,
check out Empire of Imagination. Talking about referring to a book, the book Empire of Imagination really. You read it. I read it. I think it covers a lot of stuff really well, and the whole I like the fact that you don't even know, like, talking about the whole Satanic Panic episode we did. People heard a Gygax, all this Satanism stuff. The guy was a Jehovah's Witness. Who knew that? I didn't know that till Empire of Imagination. Or he claimed to be a Jehovah's Witness. But anyway, carry on, sir. But you were saying we don't want to go into...
Oh, yeah. So, but in a way, you can take advantage of our awesome experience here. We want to try and take you back to like the second edition time frame into the 90s.
Oh, yeah.
So I know people are like, this is the golden age right here. But probably just as far as like publishing stuff came, there was so much product being put out by TSR back then.
Oh, yeah.
Like, what do we get now for 5th edition? 2 books a year?
Yeah, you know.
More? 2 to 4?
Oh, there was
If
so
that,
much.
you don't get that much.
You know, binders, notebook covers, toys, board games. I mean...
Well, not even just the peripheral stuff. I'm talking about, and I think that's why now that they are limiting them to like having maybe 2 books a year, is because you had so many campaign settings. And if you got a campaign setting, you had to have this book and that book. And during the second edition, there was just so much product, actual straight up RPG product available for you.
Birthright, Dark Suns, Hollow Earth.
Council of Worms.
Yeah. And so you've got all this different stuff, and what people got burnt, and that's where they hurt themselves. Someone say jumped on board and said, and even figure Dragonlance and the whole that setting and those modules. People run out and buy this stuff, get really into it, and go, all right, now I'm ready for that next installment or the next thing. Well, we're not going to do anything else with that. And then people are like, they get burnt in that regard. So when that next cool product comes out, they're like, I'm not going to jump on board that, because are you going to, what's the word? Not endorse it, but are you going to continue
support it? Is there going to be support behind it?
Is this going to be a dead line or whatever? You know?
Because there was just so many different box sets and realms and stuff that you could be playing in Spelljammer, Planescape.
Right? Yeah, I forgot the
So we could still spit out more that we haven't thought about right now, and all that was coming out, and you split your audience more and more. Go ahead.
I was going to say, and a lot of stuff were worthy. I mean, they really were very inventive, groundbreaking, great product. I mean, there's people that live and die and just have a passion for Spelljammer and Planescape.
Aliquim.
Yeah, Dark Suns is a really neat idea. It really turned a lot of concepts of D&D on its ear, and in a good way, and it was really a neat setting. I bought the box set. I couldn't get anybody to play it, but I thought it had merit. I mean, it really was good. And the artwork by Brom was gorgeous. But anyway.
But kind of like now, it's like, who wants to play 5th edition? Okay, now who wants to play 5th edition in the desert where spellcasters destroy the land and elves are, what were they, like 8 foot tall and feral, and halflings were cannibals.
Feral. Yeah, cannibals, yeah.
Or who wants to play in just a Ravenloft setting? Who wants to play with the vampires and stuff? You kept splitting your market, so they were in a way cannibalizing their own sales,
right?
Taken from one to another.
Yeah, because let's think about it, you're figuring, well, we'll add whole people to our market. No, you probably got this one finite market right now. You're just divvying it up, and and so I think people kind of got overwhelmed and burned out there, and then whenever collectible card games came along, what's funny was, here me and my buddies were old time role players. We stopped role playing for a while and really got into collectible card games. When we meet up, hey, I got like a couple hours on Tuesday, or Pat would be like, hey, I want to try to get a game of D&D in. Hey, let's meet up and play Magic the Gathering. So I could see where it hurt them, because once again, you've only got a finite amount of money for your hobby, and then collectible card games have never been cheap. But what's funny about it was how many people kind of got away from role-playing and got into collectible card games. But on the other hand, I remember meeting people that as you'd be playing the game, I'd be like, God, look at the elves. Look at these dwarves. They're really cool. And I would start talking about, oh, these are concepts from D&D and what a fun game. And they'd be like, huh? I'd be like, hey, you want to play D&D? And so we did bring a few people over into RPGs. But anyway.
But you would say you lost more to cards by far than you converted back over to RPG players, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, absolutely. Yeah, totally.
Which is strange to me because it doesn't scratch the same itch. You've only got a certain amount of time, so it's kind of like, oh, are we going to play an RPG or a board game or a card game or this, that, or the other? But I don't really see where it got to where it's like, my RPG itch is not being scratched by a card game.
Yeah. And that was, Yeah, one of those things that kind of even nowadays is a dilemma as adults with busy lives. I'm like, man, I'd love to play a board game. I'd love to play an RPG, but which one are we going to do?
Well, I guess it's also kind of like when that new game comes out, when everybody's playing Skyrim, and it's like, hey, are we going to meet Thursday? Well, let's not, because I'd rather be playing my video game.
Right.
For a while, it dominates.
Oh, absolutely.
But I think probably at the same time, the people that left to go to the card games, when they came back, if they ever wanted to, the landscape had changed. Now you're in third edition, and they're not supporting all these hundreds of settings.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But that's again became a problem with third edition, and we're going off on a tangent kind of. But they were putting out a new splat book every month because I honestly believe WotC was like, "We're printing money; these suckers will buy anything," and some of the suckers did buy everything. That's why a lot of them were butt hurt when 3.5 went away because they had to literally. Remember as a kid, yeah, showing my age, when you had, did y'all have an encyclopedia set at the house?
No, we were much too poor for that,
Well,
but Grandma had it.
Yeah, that's what I was going. I was like, we would have been, but green S&H green stamps. We'd fill so many books, and you'd get like A, B, C, D, E, whatever. So we had an encyclopedias. I mean, but if you've ever seen them, and I don't know, I'm using this as a reference, but I mean, like a set of encyclopedias is huge, and they take up a whole big shelf or something. Well, literally, I knew guys that were the big buy-in for 3.5. They would have 2 shelves like that, and I'd be like, Jesus Christ, who can keep up with all this? And a lot of it was junk and filler. So anyway, and I think they learned their lesson because going maybe to 5th, you don't see a book every month,
Right.
Because they know the people like, you burned me once, fool me once.
And one of the other things for the second edition days is when they had a freaking huge line of novels.
Oh yeah,
All these different settings had to have novels to go along with them.
Dragonlance. That's when R.A. Salvatore took off during that era with the Drist books or whatever.
Yeah, for Forgotten Realms.
Forgotten Realms and the Harpers and Dragonlance
But Forgotten Realms was an existing one in first edition.
Yeah.
But when you hit into second edition, instead of 1 box set, it needed like 5 box sets.
well, and then there's the Undermountain sub.
Exactly. So that's why it always had to. There was more product. You had to keep feeding the beast.
Yeah. But at least it wasn't this thing. I'll say, like. We've got to put out a whole new set of, the 3 core books every few years to keep y'all buying those or whatever. But they were doing so much stuff otherwise. But a lot of times, only the GM needs to buy it. So they finally realized, well, wait a minute. Only one person at the table is going to buy this product. I don't know. That's a whole other thing.
Yeah, they were a victim of their success because they thought it would always keep going at this rate. And did you see that that's where they ended up having to make a deal with Random House for their... What they did was they printed so much stuff that wasn't selling, they had to get locked into a printer. So they made a contract with them. They said, if you'll please print some more of our stuff, we will make a contract with you that says only you can do our printing. So that was a huge mistake right there.
Because Random House had the print, the plates or whatever, the whatever for their product. So yeah, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, when your printer can just shut you down, and that's what happened. It's like, we haven't got paid, so we will not print anything. When you can't put out any more product on the shelf, you're done.
And that's the idea. If you want to think of it as them printing money, the thought was, well, we're really getting behind, but we'll just print some more stuff. We'll sell X amount of it. We'll have revenue that we can pay you with. There was the catch-22.
Yeah.
We're not going to print any stuff.
But I think Random House was the one that came in as a publisher and was helping them, and then the printer was separate. But Random House also, so you're locked into a printer, you can't print anything. Then Random House is like, yeah, I know we got all this stuff from you to distribute. Well, here's millions of dollars in returns. This is the stuff that we can't sell.
Yeah, you mentioned to me they got a bunch of these returns, and that's what killed them.
Ugh.
All the returns. But that's like even now, we've heard stories about there are old warehouses and things in places where they still find some boxes and crates of this stuff from way back when. They're like, oh, wow, what the hell is this?
But indeed, it was a lot of hubris on TSR's part right there that everything we do is going to be gold.
Yeah.
And if we decide to get into the collectible card game market, we will crush whomever. So we need to make sure we print out just millions and millions of dollars worth of that. Oh, and this dice game is going to take off. And it did okay, but they thought it was going to go phenomenal. That initial little success from the dice game, they're like, this is going to be the next big thing. And it wasn't.
Yeah, and speaking as someone who bought into both, I bought the initial starter set of the dice, and I was like, eh. I mean, even me, I was like, what is this? Didn't like it. Didn't buy any boosters for it. And I think Gary and even Alvin might have bought like the initial dice set or whatever, and we played it like once. But then also, I bought into Spellfire, which is a collectible card game, and it had beautiful artwork because, through the years, TSR had paid some incredibly talented artists to do some really great fantasy artwork. Problem was, there was no unique new artwork. It was all this rehashed, recycled artwork, which is not the worst, the greatest crime you could commit, but that was a complaint I remember back then for a number of people.
Well, first off, how was the game?
Oh, it was awful.
So there you go, folks.
And again, I think they just thought against hubris that, like, well, we're TSR, we'll just slap this out the door and people will lap it up. Mm-hmm. No, it really, and I mean, don't get me wrong, through the years, like, it never had the success of Magic the Gathering, but like Legend of the Five Rings was a worthy contributor to the collectible card game market. A number of people really swore by it and liked it, and it went on for a number of years. But I mean, it fell by the wayside. But as did numerous others.
But Legend of the Five Rings comes back into the TSR story too.
Yeah.
Because I guess it was the president of that company that actually saw the shape that TSR was in and considered buying them. Mm-hmm. And then he went to WotC and said, hey, why don't we work this deal and you can buy my company too? Mm-hmm. You take these all at once.
What's really one of the saddest stories of all is the Richard Garriott, who had originally came up with the concept of Magic the Gathering. And even that, the old story, nothing's really original. He actually got the idea from a board game. Mm-hmm. And but they came up with the collectible component, and that's what's solid gold. But he first went to TSR, and they like, man, get out of here. He went to Steve mm-hmm. Jackson Games, and Steve Jackson's like, meh. Mm-hmm. But luckily, he went to actually originally it was a board game, Robo Rally. He was trying to sell, and he had played with his buddies. He came up with guy's like a math teacher. And that's the story. He went to WotC with this Robo Rally, and they were like, we don't want to get into board games. You got any other ideas? And he goes, well, there's this card game I've been playing with my buddies. And the rest, as they say, is history. But it's sad to think that, man, what if, how different this story would be right now if TSR had said, hey, you got anything different, guy?
Well, yeah, if TSR had started the collectible card game, who knows if that would even be a thing now.
Yeah.
That could have been something that they crushed it, or they just bungled it coming out.
Yeah. Like you say, what if even then they might have bungled it or mismanaged it or whatever. So, anyway.
But, yeah, back in the day, there was so much TSR product on the shelf. There was always something new, something more to buy. Do you remember the first time you saw the, what was it, Dragon Dice?
Yeah. I was actually working in a game store, I believe, at that time. Mm-hmm. So, I was like, oh, boy, I get it at cost or whatever.
So, I was just a dude going through the RPG section at, like, what were the little shops at the time, like, not Hastings, but the little, like, Walden Books in the mall. Mm-hmm. All the little bookstores that used to be in the mall, if you remember malls and bookstores.
Walden Books and
B. Dalton's.
B. Dalton. You beat me to it, bookseller. Yeah, I remember that. If I went to the mall, I went to both of those.
But when Dragon Dice came out, I picked up a copy and held it in my hands, and I was like, okay, but actually I'm going to buy the new Ravenloft box that's out or something else. I'm still buying RPG stuff. So the collectible card game and the dice was completely wasted on me. Mm-hmm. I didn't want it.
Right. But
for you, since you were in the shop, you were able to get stuff, so you were kind of like, oh, okay, I can try it out.
Yeah, and that was, and honestly, my boss at the time was one to encourage me, because that side of the store was like, I don't want to deal with those role-playing freaks. So it was up to me to, like, by all means, open a box. I mean, there's times if I didn't show interest, I should have, if I was smart, I wouldn't have showed interest in anything. He'd basically, here's a copy of it, learn this, be able to teach it to people that come in and sell it, Mm-hmm. So, anyway.
But the dice game really didn't catch on with you or catch on in the store.
No, I don't remember anybody, really. I think me and Gary, maybe Alvin, tried to get together and play it one time, if even, and it was just like, meh. It was a big meh.
Yeah, and then Spellfire trying to be a direct competitor and failing.
Horribly. But they'd spent a lot of money on these products and rolling them out. They didn't do the whole test market thing first and stuff that you hear nowadays. I guess they just were so full of themselves, or who knows.
But I would say back in the 90s, we would have said, there's no way this will ever end. This will be a success forever.
So here's a question I'll pose to you. Did you ever get into the skills and powers?
No, I was out by then.
Okay, you were out. So yeah, towards the end of second edition, they'd introduced some books that really allowed a lot of customization, which really hadn't been a thing up till then. Because like in D&D, it's like, hell, I can remember the early days where it's like roll 3 dice 6 down the line in a row. Those are your stats. Suck it up, And then eventually it might be like, well, I'll let you move the stats around, or you'll be able to switch to, or well. So with skills and powers, there were some books they put out towards the end that allowed you to really, let's just call a spade, min-max your character if you were that guy. Or if not, you could definitely customize the character. It was a point system. And they did a number of these books. And you can even there were some rules in that for the second edition DMG, this was very further into the printing where it was the like DMG Mark II. And it was that same black cover with red lettering as the skills and powers. There's a whole chapter dedicated to like customizing, building the exact character you wanted. And so anyway, yeah, so that became a thing. So that people either loved it or they hated it. And I remember people that hated it, didn't like it, wouldn't allow it at their table, thought it was just heresy. So that probably didn't help them either necessarily. Yeah.
But second edition didn't kill it. Second edition didn't kill the game. That wasn't no. It wasn't like fourth.
Oh yeah,
which say what you will.
Much maligned.
Yeah, that really could have been a death blow there. And I remember at fourth, you knew you weren't in the Golden Age.
Oh yeah,
you were like, oh man, nobody's buying this.
It was a huge shot in the arm for Paizo and Pathfinder. Yep. Pathfinder was Ascendant. That was the
Golden Age of third party, or that's like.
Yeah.
I can't remember if me and you were making this analogy the other day, or maybe it was me and Gary, where it was like, you've got your Coke and your Pepsi. Mm-hmm. In the RPG field, there was no Pepsi. Yeah. Dungeons and Dragons was the Coca-Cola, and then Paizo was the RC Cola. They were the big red, whatever. They exist, but you don't have to worry about them taking your market share. Yeah. And that was like, okay, now Diet Right is beating the crap out of Coca-Cola. You're like, what?
Wait, what? Yeah.
So in fourth edition, it seemed like the writing was on the wall.
Oh yeah, it looked pretty dire.
In second edition, the writing was on the wall that it's like, this will be a golden age forever. And in fourth edition, you're like, this will never improve. This is the last generation of RPG from D&D, maybe.
Yeah. And this is how D&D ends.
Yeah, it was very weird. But that's, as you go through a long RPG career, you'll see that stuff.
Oh yeah, it's wild. Because I mean, fourth is really doesn't probably deserve all the shade that gets thrown at it. Yeah, I was gonna say it's very much maligned, and some of that rightfully so. But anyway, we played fourth edition for a while. But I mean, I will say I've played every edition of D&D practically, and even some of its competitors. And I mean,
Well, here's another one. As like one of the golden age things for right now is there's so much third party. Mm-hmm. But there was a ton of third party back then. Mm-hmm. Call of Cthulhu was big back then.
Oh yeah.
Instead of having Goodman Games, you had Steve Jackson Games.
Right.
You had GURPS and you had Rifts and all that. Mm-hmm. There were competitors. So I mean, you did have other places to go if D&D wasn't your game.
Yeah.
The role-playing games were everywhere.
Because it's funny, growing up and through my life, there's been those people that are indie people. They're like, I don't listen. Right. Like the second that song premieres on the radio, they're not going to listen anymore. But before then, like, listen to this band I discovered and listen to their music. Their stuff's cutting edge.
The hipsters.
So the hipsters, And so there's been a lot of those people that, maybe not to say hipsters, but that basically is like, I will not play D&D because it's the original. It's when all the pedestrians, the Philistines play. I play whatever weird off the wall, kind of thing. But there's definitely some diamonds in the rough out there, and they're not even rough. I mean, there's some good stuff.
Yeah. Oh, you had White Wolf.
Oh yeah.
Which we completely forgot about that.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Did you play White Wolf back in the day?
Some. Eventually, they came out with their fantasy line of like a game that's supposed to be competitive with D&D. But even before that, of course, was
werewolf and mage, vampire, mage, wraith,
changeling.
Which again goes into everybody thought they would be printing money forever because this is the golden age of RPGs back in 1990-ish.
Sure.
Wow. Isn't it weird? Everything that's new is old, and everything that's old is new. It comes back into fashion.
And it's wild because it feels like, the 90s, that was like yesterday. No, that was, 25, 30 years ago. But anyway. But it's
20
really.
years ago was the year 2000.
Yeah. But it's one of those things, guys, that it's like, hopefully, if you're like, I just appreciate history in general. And then it's interesting to think there's an absolute, but it's been around long enough, there's a history of RPGs.
Yeah, and we get that a lot of people listening to this aren't even as old as us. And you weren't there in the earlier days, and we weren't there at the beginning of times.
No.
But I think hopefully it's interesting for you to hear some stories from the old people telling you about what it was like back then when you could actually go buy this stuff on the shelf instead of having to go find it in somebody's dusty bin now.
Yeah. And it's like wild how much some of this old stuff's going for.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
So, there was a lot of third-party stuff back then. There was just a ton of inventory on the shelves. You were never at a loss for something new to buy from TSR.
Or these other companies.
Yeah. Oh, Ravenloft was kind of put aside by WotC because I think of Vampire.
Oh, wow.
Because they were like, Vampire's beating you guys down in popularity. Whereas I don't personally see Ravenloft and Vampire as competing products.
Yeah, not at all. That was silly on their part. But I know that I thought I might touch on this while we're talking about second edition. Like, was there a necessity for second edition? I mean, honestly.
Yes.
Yeah. And one of the reasons why was, if y'all have listened to and if you haven't listened, I'd like to think it's one of our better ones. But anyway, the Satanic Panic, we talked about bad or bothered about D&D and the public outcry and all this so-called public outcry. They kind of cleaned it up because second edition does not have half-orcs. It didn't have the assassin class. And there wasn't much reference to demons or devils.
You know what else second edition doesn't have?
What's that?
Gary Gygax.
Oh, that's right.
Because that was part of his deal, too, was he was still going to get paid for his works that he had done. So they're like, we're going to reprint all this so you stop getting the money from first edition stuff, which, I mean, they really were trying to stick it to him.
Yeah, absolutely. Every way they could. We're going to take your name off your baby.
Well, here's a what if for you. What if Gary Gygax had got to do third edition? Because even him doing second edition would have been different. But if he got another edition.
Well, it's like when he got ousted, he went out and formed his own game company, of course. But this was when, and again, if you'll read that Empire of Imagination or the other worthy contributors, they'll probably, I know Empire of Imagination talks about, beyond just D&D, the history of role-playing games to a certain degree. Initially, they were somewhat basic because this was the giant upon which shoulders.
So everything was rules light.
Rules light, but it wasn't because it was intended that way. It was just, this is the original iteration of these games.
But then
they got crunchier and crunchier and crunchier to the point it was just ridiculous. And we get it. There are a lot of nerds and geeks that play D&D, especially probably back in the day, that were like, I'm an astrophysicist, by day and D&D at night. But it's like, it got to be, and that's what I talked about with 3.5, this encyclopedic amount of information. It was overwhelming. It was annoying. It kept people out of the game.
And Gary Gygax was right there with it, with his legendary journeys, where you needed a math degree to play the game. And that's where it went. It went from...
And a graphing calculator.
Yeah, it went to some very loose codified rules so you could play pretend to where you needed your graphing calculator, and that was what was fashionable. If players could make sense out of your rules, you were doing it wrong. If somebody off the street could just come in and pick it up, that's not good. It's got to be a lot more difficult to learn the rules. There's got to be 6 different sub-rules for everything. For example, who even wants to do a grapple?
Yeah, right.
That was the joke forever.
It was a joke. Like 3.5, it's like, grappling, because it was this whole algorithm or something. It's like, come on. There's got to be an easier way, So, it was just silly how crunchy it was. And look, we went into a
what's
renaissance.
The trend now?
We've trended back the other way, where rules, not for everybody, but for a lot of people. And that's me. I find that, like I've said in recent years, rules get in the way of the game.
So if you want to see what 6th edition is going to be, that's it. It's got to bring back the crunch. It's got to have the cry from the people that are like, it's not codified enough. I need more rules. I need this written out like a legal contract. Yeah. Which I will hate because I'm very rules light.
Yeah, that's
and Gary will love.
Yeah. Finally, the perfect game. Well, wait, this one little tweak I need to make. Ugh. Anyway, we love you, man. Anyway, so anything else to touch on there, Mister?
Yes, I will.
Eddie?
We're getting a little long in the tooth here, but one thing
Yeah.
that I did want to mention was
Sure.
when WotC bought them, they said that, well, they got a lot of feedback, and for Magic the Gathering, they did a lot of research with their players. So I applaud them for that they really got to know their player base. And that's what WotC did. They did the market research and was like, TSR did not take feedback from their customers at all. They did not give the customer what they wanted. They told the customer what they wanted.
Right.
So, and there was a lot of that. And like the point about Ravenloft comes from that, where it was like, actually, this is considered a competing product, so we're going to get rid of that. Yeah, but there was a lot of that TSR mentality where we know what's going on and we'll direct the market and we will tell you what you want.
Yeah, because I will say
They didn't see the writing on the wall there either.
right. That's where Pathfinder even improved on 3.5 because there were certain glaring things that were just, and we as the players have been playing the game for years, and it was all, and the internet was a thing by then. So we're all the internet going, dude, power attack is broke, power attack is broke, power attack is broke, power attack is broke. Never did anything about it. And finally, day one, Pathfinder literally had all these forums and read them, and like day one, they're like, oh yeah, we're going to fix Pathfinder. So even then, some of these companies just get, I don't know.
And then, okay, one more final note was that when D&D was created, they actually had it, they gave thought to it that they never wanted to be in the hands of non-gamers. They always wanted the core of it to be a gamer. And that's one of the reasons I think that Gary Gygax thought he'd always be involved and he'd always be the lead dog for TSR no matter who had the stocks or this, that, and the other. So what do? Once he's ousted, who gets it is Lorraine Williams,
who was
is
supposedly
not a gamer.
for having known for supposedly, this is a rumor, I don't verify, she had a disdain for gamers. And this is the woman who's the number one person at what was the Ooh La La gaming company at that time.
And that's one of those reasons probably why it was like, you'll eat what we give you. We know what you want. Whatever we put out there, you'll hog it up, piggies.
Yeah.
And then when WotC did buy TSR, they said this will keep it in the hands of the gamers because we're gamers.
Yeah.
And those guys had kind of started from Dungeons and Dragons too.
Yeah.
And then a few years later, what happens?
Yeah, here comes Hasbro.
Yeah, which is not gamers, in which they had always fought against being owned by some mega corporation.
And that's one reason why what's his name stepped away, but he kept his hands on
Gen Con.
Gen Con because he's still making money hand over fist with Gen Con, by the way.
Yep.
So okay, now you've got me going. One more little tidbit from me. Here's an interesting thing. So I'd been playing Magic the Gathering, and we'd been playing that for a while. But I had been on a forum somewhere, and they had talked about this is when Wizards of the Coast was just doing Magic the Gathering. This is before they bought WotC. Before they bought TSR, and they were putting out feelers that they were looking for their own unique games and role-playing games. They decided they wanted to branch out more into role-playing games. I was in communication with a person at that company that my old post-apocalyptic game, Afterworld, there was a number of back and forth emails, and I had submitted like a rough draft of it, and I was really getting excited to think that I would have my role-playing game, published. And then the next thing you know, it was all over the place. WotC has bought out TSR, and I was like, oops. And I got a little sorry, bud, but we've just
That's
bought
done.
it. It's done. We own Gamma World, D&D. Yeah, thanks for your interest in our little back and forth, but we're not looking for any new role-playing games. I'm like, all right, thank you.
Well, to go back to WotC getting brought out by Hasbro, do you know what actually made Hasbro pull the trigger? That was the final last carrot to dangle in front of them so that they're like, yeah, we'll buy you for just an ungodly amount of money. Pokemon.
Oh, yeah.
Because Wizards ended up getting the rights to the Pokemon card game.
Which was hot poop at that time.
But I think they had it originally, so they didn't know if it was going to be hot poop. They assumed, and that was one of the things, Hasbro tried to buy them out, and they're like, well, that would be okay, but you haven't given us anything for our Pokemon that's going to hit. So they got a lot of different things built into the contract then, where it was like, okay, we're going to give you this much more based off of the Pokemon money coming in, and if it does well, you'll get more money too. And buddy, they did.
Oh yeah, I can remember going into gaming stores that originally popped up selling Magic. That was their real bread and butter. And then going into those game stores, and it would be literally 8 through 12-year-olds wall to wall screeching and clamoring, and oh man, it was a madhouse.
So your game store really changed for those of you that didn't exist in a pre-Magic world.
Oh yeah,
it was a different place. They actually had to make money without Magic cards, if you can imagine.
Yeah, because nowadays most of these stores, that's what props them up.
Yep.
Let's be honest. I know a lot of tabletoppers and RPGers that are like, Magic, and I'm like, all you want. The game store probably wouldn't be here for your benefit if it wasn't for Magic. Let's put things in perspective. I know that some of the tabletoppers and RPGers resent that, but it is what it is.
Oh, yeah. No, I give them their props. I'm not going to hate on Magic because it's keeping the doors open.
No, I'm not going to tie my vein off again and start tapping. I've been there. They call it cardboard crack for a reason. Hey, for you though, to have the wherewithal, the time, the money, knock yourself out. But I'm going to keep my marriage intact.
Okay, I think that's all it for Grandpa's story time. With us being the grandpas. You got any last shots you want to give them?
No, just by all means, again, thanks to some people who've gotten some really good feedback and ideas for topics. We really appreciate that. Thank you.
Where can you leave us feedback?
I have no earthly idea.
So if you go to the the Longview Computer Center, they will tell you where to leave your feedback. You can leave it right here on SoundCloud if you're listening there, probably on your little iTunes.
On Facebook.
You can leave it on Facebook when we post this up.
And, of course, if you use emails, noclassrpgpodcast@gmail.com.
Right on. So with that, I can see we're all out of hit points.